Eric had always been just an average man. He wasn't a soldier or a politician. He wasn't a hero or a warrior. He was simply someone who did his job, and did it well. He had worked for the Galactic Council for many years, helping with missions that most others would have turned down, but this last mission was different. It had been dangerous, it had been long, and, to his surprise, it had been a success. Eric was called into the Council's headquarters one quiet afternoon. The towering buildings seemed to shimmer under the bright lights of the galaxy. The council members sat at their long circular table, each of their faces unreadable, their eyes fixed on him. "You have done well, Eric," said one of the council members, her voice cold but respectful. "You completed the mission. With precision and skill, as a reward, you were given a choice." Eric stood there, trying not to show how confused he felt. Choice, what did that mean? A door opened behind him, and two figures stepped inside. They were women, alien women. The first one was tall and graceful. She had long, flowing silver hair that shimmered under the lights. Her skin was a soft shade of lavender, and her eyes were a deep, mysterious blue. Her posture was elegant, like she was born into royalty, but something about her looked wrong. Her wrists were chained to heavy metal cuffs, barely letting her move. Despite her chains, there was something noble in her demeanor, as if she had not yet fully accepted her fate. The second woman was very different. She was shorter, but built like a warrior, with strong muscles and a presence that seemed to demand respect. Her skin was a deep earthy green, and her eyes were fierce, like a predator. Her chains were also tight, but they didn't seem to bother her as much. She stood tall, her head held high, as if ready for any challenge. Eric's heart raced. He had no idea what was going on. Why were these women chained? What did the council expect from him? He glanced at them, both, his mind racing, trying to understand the situation. The council member spoke again, breaking his thoughts. "Eric, you have the honor of choosing one of these women. As your reward, you may pick either one. The other will remain with us." Eric's confusion deepened. What did this mean? Why would they give him a choice like this? The two women, each so different, each so beautiful in their own ways, stood before him, their faces showing neither hope nor fear, just quiet resignation. "You may choose," the council member said. "Again, one of them will serve you, and you may do with her as you wish." Eric's mind raced, but his body remained still. He looked at the two women again. They had clearly suffered, but they were not broken. There was a fire in their eyes despite the chains that held them down. The woman with lavender skin met his gaze. Her eyes were full of quiet dignity, but also something more, a plea for freedom. Eric could see it in the way her shoulders sagged slightly under the weight of her chain. She was someone who had known better days, someone who had lost everything, but had not yet given up. The warrior woman with the green skin stared back at him with defiance. She didn't look sad, nor did she beg for pity. Instead, her eyes burned with an intense focus, as if she was waiting for him to make a decision, a choice. She seemed to say, "Choose me or choose her. Either way, I will not break." Eric was torn. How could he choose? Could he pick one over the other, when both seemed so strong, so full of life? He had been given this chance, this reward, but the more he thought about it, the more it didn't feel like a reward at all. Felt like a test that he wasn't sure he was ready to take. "Choose," the council member repeated. Eric looked from one woman to the other, could feel the weight of the decision on his shoulders. The council was watching him closely, waiting for his answer, but all he could think about was how wrong this felt. There was something in his gut telling him that this choice wasn't about who was more beautiful or who could offer him more. It was about something deeper, something more important. He swallowed hard. "I don't think I can choose," he said finally. His voice, barely above a whisper. The room fell silent. The council members exchanged glances, surprised by his answer. "You must choose," the council member insisted. "It is the law. You have completed your mission, and you deserve your reward." Eric's mind raced again. Is this really a reward? He thought. How could I choose between them? The two women stood in silence. Neither of them seemed surprised by his answer. The lavender-skinned woman lowered her head slightly, as if accepting his hesitation. The green-skinned warrior woman, however, watched him carefully, her eyes never leaving his. Eric took a deep breath. He was no longer sure what was right or wrong, but one thing was clear. He could not simply pick one and leave the other behind. It didn't feel right, and as the weight of that decision pressed on him, he realized that the choice wasn't as simple as the council had made it out to be. The days following the council's Offer were long and filled with confusion. Eric couldn't shake the image of the two alien women so different from the other, yet both carrying an undeniable sense of strength. The reward that had been promised to him felt more like a heavy burden. He had completed the mission, yes, but now, standing at the crossroads of this unexpected choice, Eric realized that there was more at stake than he could have ever imagined. The council had given him little time to decide. Must choose soon, they had told him. We do not tolerate delays, but Eric couldn't be rushed. This wasn't just about picking one woman over the other. It was about doing what felt right. Unable to sleep, Eric spent the night walking the quiet halls of the council headquarters, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. He had been summoned to the council in the morning, and the decision had to be made then, but how could he choose between them? The next morning, he walked into the grand chamber again. The two women were standing side by side, their chains still binding them to the floor. The sight of them brought a wave of guilt crashing over him. How could they stand there, their futures decided for them, while he was allowed to make a choice that would shape their lives? Have you decided? Eric, the council member who had addressed him before, looked at him with cold eyes, waiting for his answer. Eric paused, his mind racing. He glanced at the two women. Once again, the lavender-kinned woman stood with an air of quiet grace, her eyes serene yet filled with sorrow. She had been a princess. Once he knew she had told him that during their brief conversation the day before, her voice soft as she spoke of her lost kingdom. It was clear that she had once commanded great respect, but now she was a prisoner, as bound by her chains as she was by her memories. The other woman, the warrior, stood tall and unmoving. Her posture was stiff with defiance, as if the chains that held her were nothing more than a small inconvenience. Eric had learned from the council that she had been captured during a battle. Fierce and skilled fighter who had been captured and enslaved. She didn't speak much, but her eyes told stories of strength, courage, and a willingness to fight to the end. She didn't need to be rescued, she had said when Eric asked her. She was strong enough to fight her own battles, even if it meant remaining in chains. Eric knew that neither woman was weak, neither woman was a prize to be claimed easily. They both had their own histories, their own paths, their own stories, and yet here they were chained, and at the mercy of a man who was not much different from the others who had held them captive. He looked at the council member and then back at the women. I don't think I can choose, he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. Neither of them should be chosen over the other. They both deserve more than what you're offering. The council member narrowed her eyes, obviously displeased. You must choose, she repeated, her voice colder. Now the law is clear. Eric stood silently for a moment, deep in thought. He had to make a decision, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized that this wasn't just a decision about which woman to pick. It was a decision about what kind of a person he wanted to be. Would he be like the others who viewed the women as mere objects, or would he be different? Would he find a way to honor them both? Suddenly, the lavender-skinned woman spoke. Her voice was soft but firm, and she looked directly at Eric. You do not have to choose. You are free to make your own path, she said. We are not objects for you to choose from. We are individuals. Eric's heart skipped a beat. Her words were a breath of fresh air, a relief. For the first time, he realized that the choice didn't have to be so simple. He didn't have to pick one over the other, could free them both. The green-skinned warrior woman, who had been silent until now, gave him a small approving nod. She too seemed to understand the weight of the situation, her eyes meeting his with an unspoken message. It wasn't about choosing between them. It was about freeing them. It's about standing up for what was right. Eric turned to the council member, his decision now clear in his mind. I cannot choose between them, he said firmly. I want to free them both. The council member stared at him, her face hardening. That is impossible, she said, her tone sharp. You must choose one. That is the law. Eric shook his head. I don't care about the law. The law is wrong. These women deserve freedom, not a choice between one or the other. I refuse to choose. The silence in the room was deafening. Council members exchanged nervous glances, unsure of how to respond. Eric stood tall, his heart racing, but his mind clear. He had made his choice. It was time to face the consequences. The lavender-skinned woman smiled, faintly a look of gratitude in her eyes. The warrior woman stand softened just slightly, her expression unreadable, but somehow more open than before. They didn't need to be chosen. They needed to be freed. and for the first time since he had been offered the reward, Eric felt like he was doing something truly right. Eric's decision to refuse the council's offer had been made, but as he stood in the room, the tension in the air was thick, and he felt the weight of his choice pressing down on him. The council members exchanged looks, their faces filled with disbelief. They had expected him to follow the rules, to make a simple decision, but instead he had done something unexpected. He defied them. The council member who had spoken earlier, a woman with sharp features and cold eyes, stepped forward. "You do not understand, Eric," she said, her voice low and steady. "This is a law. You cannot simply take both of them." Eric's heart raced, but his voice remained calm. "I understand perfectly, and I still refuse to choose. Both of them deserve freedom. Why should I have to pick one over the other? They should both have the chance to live their lives as they choose." The other council members remained silent, watching the exchange unfold. Some of them appeared uncomfortable, but none of them spoke up. The lavender-skinned woman and the warrior woman remained standing beside him, their chains still binding them. They had both been quiet, watching Eric's confrontation with the council, but now they both looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, hope. "I will not allow this," the council member said, her voice rising with authority. "You cannot take both of them. You are not in a position to make such decisions." Eric stepped forward, his eyes steady. "Maybe I'm not in a position to follow your laws, but I'm in a position to do what's right, and what's right is to free them both." The room grew quiet. Eric's words hung in the air, the weight of his decision now clear for the first time. He felt a sense of purpose, of clarity. This wasn't just about him. It wasn't just about making a choice between two women. It was about standing up for what was right, even when it meant going against the powerful forces that controlled the galaxy. The lavender-skinned woman spoke for the first time since the confrontation began. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but full of emotion. "You do not have to choose us. You see us as we are, as individuals, and not as prizes to be won. We are free in your eyes, even if the council refuses to see it." Eric nodded, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and sadness. He had only done what he believed was right, but the gratitude in the woman's eyes made him realize the weight of his actions. The warrior woman said nothing, but her gaze met his with an understanding that needed no words. Her defiance was not just for herself, it was for them all, for freedom. The council member glared at him, but it was clear that she was no longer in control of the situation. Eric had turned the tables. The others in the room were beginning to realize that his defiance was not an act of rebellion, was an act of justice. But even if they saw it now, it didn't matter. Eric had made his choice. He was not going back down. "You will regret this," the council member said, her voice dripping with venom. "You cannot simply take what you want. The consequences will be severe." Eric didn't flinch. "Maybe I will, but I will live with those consequences. And if standing up for these women, for their freedom, is wrong, then I'll gladly face whatever comes next." For a long moment there was silence. The council members exchanged uncertain glances, their expressions shifting from anger to frustration. Finally, the leader of the council spoke, his voice firm but resigned. "Very well," he said. "You may take them, Eric, but understand this. You are breaking the law, and there will be consequences." Eric nodded, his resolve unshaken. "I understand, and I will face them, but I won't let anyone decide the fate of these women for me." He turned to the lavender-shed woman and the warrior woman. "You are free," he said simply. The chains that bound them were still in place, but his words had broken a hold that the council had on them. Slowly, both women stepped forward, their movements graceful and purposeful. They were free, not just from the chains that bound them, but from the fate that had been decided for them by others. The council members said nothing more as Eric turned and led the two women out of the chamber. The tension in the room was palpable, but Eric didn't care. He had done what he believed was right, and that was all that mattered. As they left the council building, Eric felt a sense of freedom he had never experienced before. He had defied the system. He had chosen to stand up for what was right, even when it seemed impossible. The two women walked beside him, their faces full of gratitude, but also something else, something deeper. They were free, but more than that, they were no longer defined by their chains. They were individuals with their own futures ahead of them. Eric didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know what consequences the council would impose or how the galaxy would react to his actions. But he did know one thing. He had made the right choice, and for the first time in his life, that was enough. Eric had barely stepped out of the council building when he felt the weight of the decision settle over him. The women walked beside him, their steps light, yet filled with purpose. He could feel their eyes on him, both filled with gratitude, but also with something more, something that made him realize just how much they had endured. The chains were gone, but their pasts were not so easily forgotten. The air outside the building was warm, a slight breeze rustling the leaves of nearby trees. Eric took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing thoughts. He had freed them, yes, but what now? The council would not simply let this act go unpunished. They were too powerful, too controlling to allow one man's defiance to go unanswered. He didn't have to wait long to find out. As they made their way down the street, a low hum reached Eric's ears, growing louder by the second. His heart skipped a beat. He turned, and his eyes narrowed as he saw the group of soldiers approaching, elite forces from a council, armed and ready. Eric could see the determination in their eyes as they moved in, surrounding him, and the two women, they didn't need to say a word. It was clear they had been sent to bring them back, to imprison them. Once again, the lavender-skinned woman who had spoken so gently before stepped forward. "You know this is not over," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "They will come for us, but we will not go back." Eric glanced at the warrior woman. Her eyes were focused, her body tense, ready. "For anything, we won't go back," she repeated, "but we must stand together. We can't face them alone." Eric nodded. His heart was still racing, but he understood what they meant. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about them all. If they were going to fight, they would need to fight together. Wasn't just about freedom for one woman. It was about freedom for all. The soldiers moved closer, their weapons ready. Eric didn't hesitate. "We don't want to fight," he said, his voice firm. "But if you force us, we will." The council soldiers hesitated. They had likely never been spoken to this way. Eric knew they were trained for battle, but they weren't prepared for defiance like this. They were used to following orders, to bringing people back into line, but they weren't ready for someone who would stand up to them. The lavender-skinned woman took a step forward, her eyes flashing with something new, something fierce. "You think we're weak because we've been chained? You think we're broken?" She raised her chin, a slight smile playing at the corners of her lips. "We're not. We've only been waiting for someone to give us the chance to fight." Watched as the soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. The warrior woman stepped forward, now her posture strong and unwavering. "You think you can control us," she said, her voice carrying authority. "But you can't. We are no longer your prisoners, and we will never be again." The soldiers hesitated for a moment longer, then looked to their leader for guidance. The leader, a tall man with a stern face, stepped forward. "You are breaking the law," he said coldly. "You are committing treason against the council. We will bring you back one way or another." Eric's resolve hardened. He didn't want to fight, but he would not allow these women to be dragged back into captivity, not after everything they had been through, not after what he had just done for them. He looked at the two women, their eyes meeting his with shared and earnest. Standing, they were ready. They would stand with him, and together they would face whatever came next. "I won't go back," the lavender-skinned woman said softly yet with conviction, "and I won't let you take us." The warrior woman raised her fist, the muscles in her arms tense and ready. "We will fight," she said, her voice low but powerful. "We will fight for our freedom and for yours." The soldier stepped back, still unsure. Eric took a step forward, positioning himself between the two women and the soldiers. He wasn't a fighter, but he had something. They didn't. Determination. He had made a choice, and now he would live with it, would not let them be dragged back into chains. "You want to take us," Eric said, his voice steady. "You'll have to go through us." The leader of the soldiers stared at him, his expression hardening. The tension in the air was thick, but Eric didn't back down. Couldn't. The women were depending on him, and he would not let them down for a moment. The world seemed to stand still. The soldiers were unsure. The two women were ready, and Eric stood in the middle of it all, knowing that the future of their freedom was about to be decided. Without warning, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind the soldiers. Eric turned, his heart pounding. A new figure emerged from the shadows, a man dressed in black armor, his face obscured by a helmet, but there was something familiar about him. He had a presence that felt different from the soldiers, and as he stepped forward, Eric felt a sense of relief wash over him. "You're not alone," the figure said, his voice strong and Clear the fight is just beginning. Eric's heart lifted as he realized that help had arrived at rebellion, had begun. They were no longer outnumbered, they were no longer alone. The fight for freedom, for equality, was just beginning, and they would face it together as Eric, the lavender, skinned woman, and the warrior woman made their way through the quiet streets of the city. The sound of their footsteps was drowned out by the thoughts racing through Eric's mind. They had escaped the council's grasp, but now the reality of their situation began to sink in. Freedom was not easily won in the path ahead would not be smooth. The mysterious figure who had appeared in the nick of time was still walking beside them. He wore black armor, and his face was hidden behind a dark helmet, but his presence was strong. He didn't speak much, but there was an undeniable air of authority around him. Eric couldn't shake the feeling that this man was someone important, someone who knew more than he was letting on. You're not alone, the man had said when he stepped in to stop the soldiers. But who was he, and what did he mean by that? Eric knew there was more to this than just a simple act of rebellion. The lavender-skinned woman spoke, first breaking the silence. "We owe you our freedom," she said, her voice calm but filled with emotion. "You didn't have to do this, Eric. You didn't have to risk everything for us." Eric turned to look at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "I couldn't just leave you both behind," he replied. "You deserve to be free, just like everyone else. No one should live in chains." A warrior woman who had remained silent up until now spoke up. "The council has kept us locked away for far too long, but freedom isn't just about removing chains. It's about standing up to the ones who think they have the right to control us, and they will come for us, Eric. They won't let this go. We must be ready to fight." Eric nodded, the reality of the situation becoming clearer. It wasn't just about running away. It wasn't enough to hide from the council. If they wanted true freedom, they would have to face the consequences of their defiance and fight for it. "I understand," Eric said, "but I don't know how to fight. I'm just a man. I don't have the training or the resources to take on the council." The lavender-skinned woman looked at him, her eyes soft yet full of determination. "You already have what it takes, Eric. You have the strength to do what's right. It's more than most people ever have." The warrior woman gave a small approving nod. "And you've already proven yourself. You didn't back down when the council tried to control you. That's the kind of courage we need." Eric wasn't sure what to say. He had always considered himself an ordinary man, just doing his job, but now standing alongside these two women, he realized that his life had changed. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about standing up for something greater than himself. The armored figure who had been walking quietly beside them finally spoke. "The council is not the only threat you will face," he said, his voice low and grave. "There are others. It's those who work in the shadows, who seek to maintain the power that the council holds over this galaxy. They will not take kindly to your defiance." Eric turned to face the man, confusion clouding his thoughts. "Who are you, and why are you helping us?" The man stopped walking and turned to face Eric. "My name is Kale," he said, his voice clear and firm. "I am part of a group that has been working against the council for years. We've been watching them, studying their every move. We know how they operate, and we know how to fight back." The revelation took Eric by surprise. A group working against the council. He had no idea such a thing existed. He looked at Kale, trying to process what he had just learned. Kale continued, his voice steady. "The council is not just a government. It's a system that controls everything you see, everything you know. But there are cracks in the system. There are people who want to break free, and they are waiting for someone to lead them, someone like you." Eric's mind raced. Could he really be the one to lead such a movement? Could he really stand against the might of the council and the forces that backed him? He felt small, unimportant, and yet here he was standing within two women who had already faced unimaginable hardships, and a man who had risked his life to help them. "You're not alone," Kale repeated, as if reading Eric's mind. "We've been waiting for someone to step up, someone with a heart to do what's right, even when it's hard. You've already shown that you have what it takes, but you need to understand the truth about what's going on." Eric looked at the two women again. They had been through so much, yet they were still standing, still fighting. They were free now, but for how long? How much more would they have to endure before they could truly be safe? Kale's voice interrupted his thoughts. "The council's grip on this galaxy runs deep. It's not just about politics, or power. It's about control and crawl over everyone, including the people they've enslaved, people like these two. Women. He paused, looking directly at the lavender skin woman and the warrior. They are symbols. Eric, the council knows that if they lose control of their prisoners, they lose control of everything. Eric felt the weight of Kale's words. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. This wasn't just about freeing the women. It was about freeing an entire galaxy. From the council's control, you're not just fighting for them. Kale said, you're fighting for everyone. Eric nodded, feeling the truth of Kale's words settle in his chest. The fight was just beginning, and it wouldn't be easy. But they were not alone. Together, they would face the challenges ahead. Eric had always believed that freedom was a simple thing, something that everyone deserved without question. But as the days passed, the weight of his decision grew heavier. What had started as a single act of defiance against the council was now turning into something much larger, something much more dangerous. And the truth was, Eric wasn't sure if he was ready for what was to come. They had moved quickly after Kale's arrival, retreating to a hidden location. Far from the council's eyes, the two women, once chained and now free, had been by his side through it all. They had both been grateful. But now there was something else in their quiet, understanding that the path ahead would not be easy. They had a plan. Kale had shared everything he knew about the council, about the forces that worked in the shadows to keep the galaxy under their control. Eric didn't fully understand all, but he knew enough to realize the stakes were higher than he had imagined. The council won't stop. Caleb told them they will send more soldiers. They will send bounty hunters. They'll use everything in their power to hunt you down and put you back in chains. Eric had listened carefully, but his thoughts had drifted to the two women. The warrior woman with her fierce strength had stood by him from the start, ready for whatever came next, and the lavender-skinned woman, though softer in appearance, had shown a strength of her own. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind, and she wasn't afraid to stand up for what she believed in. And then there was Eric. He had never considered himself a fighter. He had always followed orders, always kept his head down. But now he was leading a fight against one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. We have to act quickly. Male continued, his voice steady. The longer we wait, the more dangerous it will become if we're going to take down the council. We need to gather support. We need to find allies. Who can help us? Eric nodded, feeling the pressure of the decision building inside him. Where do we start? There's a group of rebels on the outer planets. Kale explained. They've been fighting against the council for years. They're well-trained and well-hidden, but we can't just ask for their help. We have to prove that we're capable of taking down the council, have to show them that we're not just a group of people running away from a fight. We're ready to stand and fight back. Eric's mind raced as he processed the information. He had never imagined that his actions would lead to something like this, but now he saw no way out. The council was coming for them, and the only way to truly be free was to fight for it. The lavender-skinned woman stepped forward, her expression calm but resolute. We will fight, she said. We won't hide, won't be cowed by the council's threats. Eric looked at her, grateful for her words, but he couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. I don't know how to fight. I don't have the skills and knowledge. What if we fail? Kale's voice interrupted his doubts. Failure isn't an option. We do this or we lose everything. The warrior woman's eyes were steady, her expression hard. The council has already taken so much from us. What's left to lose? But we fight for ourselves. We fight for everyone who's been oppressed by the council. We fight for freedom. Eric took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. He had already made the decision to stand up, to take a stand against the council. Now there was no turning back. The fight had already begun. Well, need to gather resources. Kale said, weapon supplies, safe places to hide. We have to move fast. The council won't wait. They'll send their forces, and they'll be relentless. But if we're going to win, we need to strike when they least expect it. Eric nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. The rebellion wasn't just about freeing the two women. It was about standing up to the council and everything they represented. It was about making sure that no one would ever have to live in fear again. The days that followed were filled with planning. Kale led the way, organizing the group, reaching out to hidden allies, and preparing for the battle that lay ahead. The lavender-skinned woman and the warrior woman fought alongside him, each using their owned skills to contribute to the cause. Eric, though unsure of his own abilities, did what he could to help. He found himself learning quickly his fear, replaced by a growing determination. But even as they made progress, Eric couldn't shake the feeling that the council was always one step ahead. They had eyes everywhere, they had spies in every corner of the galaxy. It wouldn't be long before they realized what Eric and the others were planning. And when that day came, Eric knew they would have to be ready. The rebellion was just beginning. There was no turning back now. As they sat around the table preparing for the next move, the lavender-skinned woman turned to Eric. "You've brought us this far," she said softly. "Now we'll fight together, and we'll win together." Eric looked around at the faces of the people gathered around the table. These weren't just his allies, they were his family now. And together they would stand against the council and fight for a future where freedom was more than just a dream. The time for planning was over. Eric stood with the lavender-skinned woman and the warrior woman on a small ship heading toward the outer planets where the rebel group Kale had mentioned awaited them. The air inside the ship was thick with tension, but also something else. Hope. It wasn't often that people got a chance to change the galaxy, but that was what they were trying to do. Eric's heart raced with each passing moment. He had never been a soldier. He wasn't a leader, was just a man who had chosen to do the right thing. But now he was leading a rebellion. And though the weight of the responsibility was heavy, there was also a feeling of determination growing inside him. "We'll be there soon," Kale said from the pilot's seat. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, an awareness of what was at stake. "I've made contact with the rebels. They're ready for us, but we still have to prove ourselves." Eric nodded. The journey had been long, but now they were close to the lavender-skinned woman, whose name was Alara. Sat across from him. She had a calmness about her, but there was a fire in her eyes that made Eric admire her even more. She wasn't just a soft, beautiful woman he had met before. She was a fighter, just like the warrior woman who was sitting by the door, her sharp eyes scanning the space around them. "We have to make an impact," the warrior woman said, her voice low but firm. "The rebels won't risk their lives for us unless they know we're serious." Eric met her gaze. He could see the strength in her, the battle-hardened warrior who had fought for her own survival for so long. Her name was Kara, and she was a woman who didn't back down. "Not for anything I know," Eric replied. "We have to show them that we can stand against a council, that we're willing to do whatever it takes." Kale turned to face them as the ship began to enter the outer planet's atmosphere. "The council is powerful, but they've made a mistake. They've underestimated us. They think they can control everything. But the truth is, people are getting tired of their rule. We're not the only ones who are ready to fight back." The ship descended toward the rebel base. Eric couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. Everything had led to this point. They were no longer running. They were fighting, and that was something they couldn't take back. Oh, but the question still lingered in his mind. Could they really win? Was it possible to take down the council and free the galaxy from their control? The ship touched down on a dusty remote planet, and the door slid open. Eric stepped out first, followed by Era and Kara. The landscape was barren, the air dry and thin in the distance. He could see a group of rebels waiting for them were armed, their expression serious. Kale stepped forward, leading them toward the rebels. "These are the ones I spoke of," he said, ready to fight. "They've been waiting for someone to lead them." One of the rebels, a tall man with dark hair and a scar across his face, stepped forward to greet them. "You're brave to come here," he said, his voice gruff. "That bravery alone won't win this fight. We need more than that, need a plan, and we need the strength to carry it out." "We have a plan," Eric said, stepping forward. "That's not just about strategy. It's about what we stand for. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who's ever been oppressed by the council. We're fighting for a future where we are all free." The rebel leader studied Eric for a moment before nodding. "You're right. But words alone won't convince the people. We need action. We need to show the council that we're not afraid anymore." Eric took a deep breath. This was at the moment he had been preparing for, the moment that would decide the future of the galaxy. He turned to Era and Kara, who were standing beside him, their faces full of determination. They weren't just supporting him, they were with him every step of the way. "We're ready." Alara said, her voice steady. "We've waited long enough. It's time to fight." Kara gave a sharp nod, her fists clenched at her sides. Let's show them what we're made of. Eric looked back at the rebel leader. We'll do whatever it takes. He said, we need your help. We need everyone. The rebel leader looked around at his men and women, and after a long pause, he spoke. All right, we'll join you. We'll fight together for freedom. Rebels cheered their voices. Rising in unity, Eric could feel the surge of hope that filled the air for. The first time they were no longer just a small group of people fighting for their freedom. They were a movement. They were a force. The battle was just beginning, but they were ready. The council had made a mistake by thinking they could control the galaxy, and now they would pay the price. Eric Alara Kara. And the rebels would fight with everything they had to bring down the council and make sure that no one would ever have to live in fear again. As they prepared for the fight ahead, Eric felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. He had made the right choice. He had chosen to stand up for what was right. And now he would lead the fight for freedom alongside the people who would become his family. Together they would change the galaxy. Together they would make sure that freedom was more than just a dream.